Well, good evening, everybody, colleagues in the room and anyone who's listening in on Zoom. We're up to 7 o'clock, so I propose to start this evening's meeting of Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council's Planning Committee. I'm going to take the agenda as printed, so we'll start with item 1. Apologies. Okay, so apologies from Councillor Jones. Any further apologies this evening? And I take it that silence means there are not. So let's progress to item 2 of our agenda, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to make a declaration of interest this evening? I look around the room, I see no movement in that respect, so I'm assuming that no such declarations are going to be made. Let's progress to item 3 of our agenda, minutes of previous meeting. Those are on the current agenda on pages 3 to 6. Are colleagues content that they are a correct record of our previous proceedings? Again, I look round and I see nodding, so I'm going to take those as a correct record. That brings us to our first substantive item this evening, item 4. I draw members' attention to the fact that there is a small supplementary report which you should have sight of. Before I ask a supporter for the application, Mr. Askew, to address us, and he's going to do that via Zoom, I'm just going to ask our officers if there's any other information we need to know before inviting Mr. Askew to speak.
Thank you, Chair. No, there's nothing further to report. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Then, if I could ask Mr. Askew to be brought into the meeting electronically.
Being brought in now, Chair.
And when he arrives, if I could just ask him to signal that he's actually here and he can speak to us and he can see us.
Can you hear me?
I can indeed, yes. So just before I invite you to speak, Mr. Askew, for the benefit of anyone listening in who's not familiar with the conventions for public speaking, I'll just run through them briefly, if I may. So Mr. Askew has 5 minutes to address the committee. They'll be timed by our clerk, who's sitting to my right. After 4 of those 5 minutes have elapsed, the clerk will give an oral warning to make sure Mr. Askew doesn't miss out any points he thinks are particularly salient to his presentation. Those 5 minutes are the sum total of Mr. Askew's contribution to our debate this evening. So on those terms, I now invite him to address the committee. Mr. Askew.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to amplify upon your officer's recommendation to approve this planning application. The building was originally constructed as a department store in the 1970s, replacing the Grand Municipal Hall that was completed in 1890 to commemorate the Golden Jubilee of Queen Victoria. The current building was last utilised to house the council's public library until this facility was relocated across to Castle House, where we are today. The building has since laid vacant, detracting from the appearance and vitality of the town centre. Following a number of failed attempts from other parties to redevelop the site, the applicant purchased the property outright in late 2020. This follows on from their recent purchase and conversion of the adjacent Newcastle police station, which they sensitively converted into offices, and in fact they now occupy the upper floors as their headquarters. Indeed, the applicant has a track record of delivering high quality developments across the North Staffordshire region, including the sensitively converted Queen's Hotel in Basford to a residential development. The site is heavily constrained because of the existing structure. A viability assessment has been produced and has been independently verified to demonstrate that this development can only be brought forward without any affordable housing. The report confirms that the redevelopment of this site would in fact be completely unviable if it were not for the applicant's unique circumstances of being able to purchase the site with cash funding, having in-house design and construction resources to deliver the project, and introducing an upward extension. All of this enables the applicant to accept a lower than average profit margin to redevelop the site. They intend to develop the library site themselves, retaining ownership and management of the building and renting out the apartments. They will therefore have a vested interest in the property for the foreseeable future, which would sit proudly next door to their headquarters. A mixed-use development comprising uses that are endorsed in the town centre will provide an active frontage of commercial frontages with residential units above, increasing the footfall and improving natural surveillance. The scheme has been designed by a locally based development team, and its construction will utilise local supply chains and directly employ local apprentices. The proposal would involve the demolition of the building to the first floor slab level, its reconstruction incorporating a modern, lightweight, cold rolled steel metset frame construction with 3 vertical orientated sections and a setback mansard roof, all reducing the overall scale of the building. Improved insulation and the use of PV panels on the roof will also significantly improve the energy efficiency of the building. The applicant has worked proactively with your council's conservation officer to deliver a high quality scheme that would provide a positive landmark building within the conservation area. The proposal takes an authentic and honest design approach which integrates architectural cues and techniques from its predominantly Georgian surroundings and interprets them in a modern style, as well as incorporating secure design and surveillance measures as recommended by your police design advisor. The applicant is scheduled to commence development this spring with a view of delivering the scheme by next April. It provides an excellent opportunity to provide a new positive chapter to revitalise this tired and inefficient building. It will reintroduce vitality to this part of the town centre by providing a policy compliant scheme on this highly sustainable brownfield site. I therefore urge you to grant planning permission to redevelop this site for a mixed use policy compliant development. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Askew. Before I open the item for debate, I'll just ask our officer if he's got any comments on what he's heard so far.
No, thank you, Chair. Just to say that we have got visuals and photographs if members wish to see them. Thank you.
That's excellent, because my next question would be, can we, clearly a very important feature in our town centre, if we could have those displayed, that would be, I think, very helpful for members.
Okay, bear with me. I'll bring the artist's impression or CGI visuals up first. So there we have the CGI visuals prepared by the applicant's architect. Obviously, members will be aware that at the ground floor here that is accessed directly onto the street and Iron Market. They will be two commercial units, with the upper floors being the residential apartments. Particular features of note are it's probably not that clear to see on the screens, but there is a contrast brickwork, the red coloured brick with the feature blue stroke grey feature in the centre, and then obviously the mansard roof that Mr. Askew mentioned in his presentation. The building occupies a prominent corner plot on Iron Market with the thoroughfare through to Merrill Street. That's where the access to the basement car parking will be, which is going to provide 21 off-street car parking spaces and I think 36 spaces for cycle storage. And then the former police station is beyond at the rear of the building. So if members wish to see elevation plans or any photographs, then we can show those as well. Thank you.
And I think the elevation plans, so that we can get some feel for what it's like in its overall setting, will be useful at this point in time.
Okay. That's the elevation of the building that's there now. And there we have the top image or elevation is the elevation that fronts onto Iron Market, with the bottom image elevation being that of the side elevation that that fronts the little passageway through to Merrill Street. There are other elevations as well, which I'll seek to show you. Here we are. So there's the top image. Is the side elevation, and then the bottom image is the rear elevation, I think. Well, that's the sectional elevation, sorry. But the key images and the prominent elevations are the one that fronts onto to Iron Market, and the side elevation that goes through the thoroughfare.
Thanks very much. I now open the item for comment from members. Councillor Williams. Again, I don't know if our officer can produce some photographs or some plans which show the thing embedded in its context.
Yeah, I'll show a block plan first, and then I've got a series of photographs. I can't guarantee that the photographs show all of the viewpoints that Councillor Williams has just requested, but there are a series of photographs that should help members to see the building within its context. So this is the block plan with the building shown shaded red. Obviously, it fronts Iron Market with Iron Market running in a central position through the block plan. You've got Merrill Street towards the rear, with the police station immediately towards the rear. Obviously, Queen's Gardens and this building that we're sat in now is down towards the southeast of that block plan. Are members happy for me to move on to some photographs? So this is the image looking from just outside Queen's Garden. This image is a good example of the corner plot location of the site in its context with neighbouring buildings and the very bottom of Iron Market.
Can I just ask, Mr. Bromley, the proposal, can you give us some indication of the height of the new proposal vis-a-vis what we're seeing there?
I can, yeah. Approximately the existing building that you see on the image is between 11 and 12 metres, maybe a little bit more, whereas the proposed building is circa 4 to 5 metres taller than that existing building. Obviously, as is mentioned in the main agenda report, the new building is 5 stories in height, and the applicant has sought to reduce the scale of it with the mansard roof at the top, which is slightly set back to try and reduce the visual dominance caused by the number of stories that are proposed.
Thank you, Chair. While we're looking at that image, I believe one of the elevations that we were shown earlier, one of the side elevations, includes a blue line that demonstrates the height of the proposal against what we can see is the next building along. So if you can see the chimney stack of the building behind the library there, I don't know its address, I'm afraid. I believe that outline appears in blue on one of the elevations we were shown previously, and that might help members if we were to look at that elevation again, with that feature drawn attention to establish the height of the proposal. I have a question which you might not be able to answer that's related, which is that the gentleman who addressed us on behalf of the applicant did refer to what used to be on that site, the municipal hall, and I'm wondering how tall the municipal hall was when it was erect.
Well, as Councillor Holland suggested, it's not something that I can give an answer to, unfortunately. We can seek to try and find an image of the municipal hall in the heritage statement. So, but you'll just have to bear with me for that. What I'll do in the meantime is I'll share the elevation plan that Councillor Holland referred to as well. So yeah, that the top image in particular shows the how much taller the building is compared to the previous or the building that's there now, should I say?
The one that's there now?
Yes.
Chimney stack is the same one.
Yeah. So members will be able to see the chimney stack annotated.
Are members clear at what they're looking at there? The little blue outline shows the chimney stack, and I think I'm right in saying, Mr. Bromley, that looks like the actual stack itself marks the height of where the recessive roof would be on the new proposal. Is that correct?
That appears to be correct, yeah.
While Mr. Bromley looks for an image of the old Civic Hall, are there any other queries from members that they'd like to raise at this juncture? I mean, one query I would like to raise is about the brick set. There we have. Before I do that, there is the old Civic Hall. I think the chimney stack is the one there. Yes, Councillor Williams, on the building directly in front of that roof. Sadly, we are not contemplating a new tower, I think, this evening. But I think that is helpful. I thank Councillor Holland for asking for that, because it does give us some sense of what has been there in the past on this particular corner, which is, of course, a very prominent part of our town. My question was one about the brick set. When one comes down the Iron Market, the bricks are quite recessive in colour. I'd just like an assurance that what's proposed is not a very aggressive, bright red brick set of the sort one sees sometime, because that I think wouldn't be consonant with either the Iron Market or indeed this building, which again I think has quite a nice colour on the front. And I think I would like to see the new building, if we decide it's a good idea, to fit in with those colours rather than be a very aggressive colour standing out from them.
Sorry, Chair, we have got a materials schedule. I thought I'd got it available, but I can get it quickly. it may help, but obviously with images, as you know, they're not always a true reflection. But I thought the choice of brick that's being proposed at the moment was a good brick. Share that now. As I mentioned, it is hard to get a true reflection of a material from an image on a computer, but I wouldn't say that was a bright red brick that was being proposed in this instance.
No, again, I look for comment from colleagues, but that to me seems to be the sort of brick set we want. It's not that very aggressive, glossy red, which is suitable in some areas, it has to be said, but I don't think would fit in very well with the iron market. But that again, and Councillor Williams has pointed out, we've got nice buildings next door. It seems to me that brick set fits with next door as proposed. Councillor Moffat.
Would it be possible to see the artist's impression again, please?
Yes, I'm sure we can bring that up again. There we are, in fact. I see the words matte grey there, which I think is helpful. We certainly don't want something that's shiny there. At the same time, as we go up to the sky, it seems to me wise to have something that's reasonably light, because dark stuff as you go higher and higher becomes more and more noticeable from the ground. I'm right in saying, aren't I, Mr. Bromley, that does say matte grey. My eyes are not what they used to be.
It does, yeah. In brackets, it says lead Luke.
So have we any further comment from members before? Yes, Councillor Holland.
Thank you, and I'm satisfied, I suppose, with the comparison of the heights. It is taller than what is there at the moment, and I have reflected on what's in our report from the Conservation Advisory Working Party, and it's a fair point that they raise, but I don't believe that the building is too tall. I think particularly the mansard roof that recedes slightly away helps to soften the top floor of this proposal, and I'd be content to vote for it on that basis. I have some trepidation in relation to the provision of parking. As our report says, the number of parking spaces that are proposed is 27, shortfall on what we might consider the maximum number that we'd associate. But then again, the sort of people who'd be occupying this premises are perhaps more likely to take advantage of the sustainable transport options and the close connection to the town centre amenities. So I'm prepared to give that the benefit. The only thing like to ask officers is, could they confirm that we have done our most, and that the microphone is going, that we have done everything in our power to put pressure on and to apply scrutiny to the calculations that have been made in respect of, for example, affordable housing, because of course this is a proposal that we're looking to vote through with affordable housing provision as part of the scheme.
Yes, obviously, as is mentioned in the main agenda report, we have sought independent financial advice. It was quite categoric from the outset that the only reason why this development is progressing is because of the applicant and his ability to deliver a scheme, having learnt lessons from other developments in the borough and town centre, and him only taking a 15% profit, whereas other developers would be seeking a 20% profit, which is recognised as an acceptable profit margin. So it was quite categoric that for a number of circumstances set out in the main agenda report, the scheme was unviable. So that's why there are no Section 106 obligations associated with the development. But obviously, we will be seeking a Section 106 agreement to ensure that there is a review mechanism should the development not substantially commence usually within 12 months. Thank you.
Several members wish to speak. I'm going to take them in the order they've showed. So first, Councillor Williams, then Councillor Owen, then Councillor Burgess, then Councillor Northcott. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of detail and work has gone into this by the developer, and I welcome the report from the police. Excellent report there. Securing the building, but the occupants. In principle, I think it'd be a good development down in this particular area, not only across the road from where we sit. It's a vibrant area, the town centre, at night time and in the daytime. Daytime because of the library and people coming to the civic offices, the Castle House, and the takeaways and the restaurants and pubs that are within the vicinity. So that's going for it, and it'd be really welcome. But one of my concerns is just has full permission for. It's got the number now, Mr. Chairman. How many? I've lost it now somewhere. 36 numbered apartments. That's where I'm a little bit stuck on. What size apartments? Are they 2-bed, 3-bed? Have I missed something in the report that gives me that information? I mean, I don't think we would be 3-bed, but are they just going to be bed sits, or are we going to be stuck with a building full of bed sits? I mean, modern living, I know the IKEA living is the bed up on the wall and a lot of those. But what units, what apartments, or is that left to I'm talking myself out of this? Or is that left to the developer, depending on the market at the time?
Section 5.1, Councillor, refers to 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. I don't know if our officer has further details.
Thanks, Chair. Paragraph 4.2.
Thanks for throwing that out. Yeah, I missed that one. Yeah.
It says the proposed development of the site will result in 36 apartments, and then 24 of those being 1-bed and 12 being 2-bed units.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. Thank you. Just one more other point is on the retail or the ground floor. I mean, it's sadly to say we've got enough blank spaces in the town centre with the result of COVID and other things. The big shops, they'll never come back. Edinburgh Mill, Woolen Mill, or Ashley, and the quite big stores have closed down. Whether the town centre will ever get from there an incentive of getting those kind of shops back again. But what does the officer really feel that that ground floor space would be used for? He did mention, just wrote it down in your summary. What you said now? That would it be a mixed use or whatever? What would you envisage that would be, or in your estimation?
That's a difficult question to answer. I'm sure the applicant has done his research, but the government are trying to, for many of the reasons that you've just mentioned, to try and bring units back into use and try to make developments as flexible as possible. So in previous times, previous legislation, the restrictions on changes of use from one use to another was fairly flexible but restrictive as well. Whereas the current use classes order allows you to change from one use to another quite easily, and in many instances without planning permission. And in this particular case, with the latest use classes order, the government's brought out Class E. Now, Class E covers a whole range of different uses. So it could be a cafe from a shop. I think hairdressers are included in that. So it all depends on what demand there is for those particular units at the time. But the applicant must be confident about getting an end user in those units. And I think, as is shown on the image on the screen, is that there is a canopy or awning there to try and encourage outside activities. They're probably showing outside tables as part of a cafe to try and bring some vitality into this part of the town centre in particular. So unfortunately, I can't give you a categoric answer, but it's all about units being flexible to change and adapt, and hopefully encourage people to come into the town centre, which is obviously the key. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Chair. Could we have a look at the access to the underground car park? A couple of points that I wish to raise. I walk along that alleyway quite a lot, and there's sort of been bollards from parking the cars outside, i.e. along that alleyway, or in the iron market where we've got, or we're supposed to have, parking restrictions.
Well, I can't comment too much on people parking on the iron market. I presume that's a matter for the enforcers to clamp down on that. I'm aware that the alleyway that leads from Mariel Street to Iron Market is private, but I assume that there's some sort of right of way that allows people to have access through there. But in terms of preventing people from parking there, I know where people used to do that when it was a library, but there's no, as far as I'm aware, there's no details within the application that addresses that point, unfortunately.
Can I just ask, Mr. Bromley, which way is it envisaged that cars will access the underground car parking? Is it from Merrill Street or from the Iron Market, or from both?
I believe it's just from Merrill Street.
Councillor Burgess.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, it's just an observation, actually. With this new build, will there be any provisions for solar panels on the roof at all? This might help the environment a little bit. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, I believe solar panels are proposed, as obviously as well as all the other energy efficiencies of a new building required through primarily through building regs as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Northcote.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. It's mainly just a comment, really, about the provision of vehicle charging points within the basement. And I'm pleased to see that it's in there as a condition. And that is quite refreshing to see that there's going to be passive wiring for future proofing the actual car park itself. I think this is something as a planning authority we need to set an example, and this is I'm pleased to see that that's in here. Thank you, Chairman.
Got any further comment from members before we proceed to a vote? In that case, we obviously do have to have a vote. I'm happy to, for the purposes of having that vote, propose that we accept this as per the recommendation. I see a seconder for that. Can I see those, please, in favour of the recommendation as printed? And those against? As that is passed with a clear majority, I think. That means we can progress to our second item this evening, application which has been called in, application for minor development. One of the councillors who's called that in, Councillor Sweeney, is going to exercise his right under the Speaker's protocol to address the committee on this issue. Before he does so, again, I'll just ask our officer if there's any further information we require this evening prior to the council addressing us.
No, there's no further information at this stage. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So again, I'll just outline the protocol for the benefit of anyone who's come into the meeting late. Councillor Sweeney has 5 minutes to address the committee. They'll be timed by the clerk, who's sitting to my right, and he will give an oral warning after 4 minutes have elapsed to make sure Councillor Sweeney doesn't miss out any points he thinks are particularly pertinent to his presentation. Those 5 minutes are the sum total of the councillor's contribution to our debate this evening. So on those terms, I invite Councillor Sweeney to address the committee. Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, if I give you a little bit of background, first of all, these are ex-local authority houses. They were sold in the mid-80s under Mrs. Thatcher's right to buy before Aspire existed. There's 24 of them, so 12 banks of 2, both sides of the road. Councillor Parker, who has 2 great advantages in life. One is my next door neighbour, and 2, he lives in Clayton, was brought up in Bradwell. He was brought up in a house like this in Bradwell. I think there's quite a few in Bradwell. There's only these in Clayton. He's 24, there's no more. And he says what snug, warm houses they are. You know, he recommends them. And certainly the ones I've been into when I've been talking to residents with their concerns are all delightful inside. There might be non-standard construction. They might be looking a bit old and shabby, but inside they're absolutely fine. If you have a look on your map on page 27 of the agenda pack, you find that the outline black square misses a bit off. If you're wondering why that misses a bit off, it's because there's a planning application in for a bungalow in each of the rectangles at the bottom. That I think has still not been published yet. So there's that. They say there's a line both sides of the road of these non-standard construction houses. I've actually called us in for three reasons, which I believe are valid. First of all, they're not in keeping with the houses that surround them. These will be new townhouses, if you like, be built normal sort of houses, and they'll stick out like a sore thumb in this because they will be appeared slap bang in the middle of these metal framed houses. The second one is over intensification. There are 2 houses there, a pair of semis. They're not massive semis, they're just semis. And there's now going to be 4 houses there. And I think that's over intensification of a site. The next thing I've got is the parking. Now, if you have a look in the map on the picture there, you'll find 8 places along the frontage. Okay. Now, I maintain that they're going to be very snug and cozy parking places, these are. I don't quite know if you park your car, how you're going to open the door to get out. Well, I do know, because you won't park on there, will you? You'll park on the road, and the road is fairly busy. Mrs. Moulton, could you show me a couple of pictures, please, up and down the road that you've got?
I can when we go to debate.
Oh, there'll be the debate, have we? That's fine. Okay. And I've also got some photos of the frontage, so you'll see the scale of having 4 cars when one picture's got 2 on. One of the houses is already empty, but the other's got tenants. There's 2 cars parked on there, and you'll see. I think expressions such as putting a quart into a pint pot leap to mind on this particular place. This doesn't really happen in Clayton. I've not known this before in Clayton. These aren't massive, great properties with huge, great gardens that you can do this to. They're just bog standard semis, really. And I think this is overdoing it. Like I say, quart into a pint pot, and I'd urge refusal on the 3 grounds that I've given. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'll just ask our officer to comment on what she's heard so far. And then I think, given that a lot of what we've heard is about the street scene, if we can have a look at some photographs so that councillors can orientate themselves.
Yes, well, I'll just comment upon the area of land to the rear. As was mentioned, it's excluded from this application site, and we do have a separate planning application to develop that land into 2 bungalows. That's not been called into committee, so that application will be determined under delegated authority. There are concerns about the development, but as yet a decision hasn't been reached on that application, and you need to consider this particular proposal on its merits. Obviously, to respond to what Councillor Sweeney has said, and to do what he asked, that I show some photographs. I will now go to the photographs. Well, first of all, as I've got these easy to hand, I shall show you some Google Street Scene images, which gives some reasonable representation of the site and its wider context. And then I'll go to the photographs, which I'll have to stop sharing and open up separately. So bear with me a moment. Okay, so this is a view of the street. So these are the prefabricated properties that were referred to. The application site is just there on the right-hand side of the screen. I don't know why it's changed colour, but it is there. So yes, this site falls within a group of this particular style of properties, but there are other properties within the street scene, which the other images will show. So yes, so this is further down the road, showing other of those properties. So these are constructed with a metal cladding at the upper section, so non-standard construction. So there are red brick properties also on Stafford Crescent. There are a number of blocks of terrace properties, and also some semi-detached, which you'll see to the right of the screen. Sorry, I keep changing the colour of the image. And there are various styles. So I won't hover over the image in case I change the colour again. But yes. Yeah,
Can I just ask a question at this point, Mrs. Moulton, because the image is now up from a fair way down Stafford Crescent. I'm correct in thinking, am I, that this application site is in the centre or is flanked by these non-standard houses rather than being on the edge of that development? So on either side of the proposed site, there would be these non-standard houses, and they will be across the road as well.
That's correct, yeah. Yes. So it does fall within that enclave of that particular style of properties. But yes, Stafford Crescent is quite a long road, and there are a number of different house styles on there. So I just wanted to show the wider context. So let me show you the photographs, just bear with me. There we go. So yes, so this shows you that the application site does fall within the group of this particular style of properties, because the pair of semi-detached properties that are to be demolished are that pair there. So the one on the right has an additional canopy. That's obviously a more recent addition. It wasn't part of the property as originally constructed. So I'll just take you through the other photographs. So another image showing the frontage of the application site. So that's directly in front. So at the moment, the property to the right, a lot of the frontage is taken up with hard standing, but the property to the left still has a bit of a front garden. Well, I'll come to the block plan in a moment when we talk about, we can talk about parking. Yes, so a lot of images of the front. So this is to the rear. So this is not that particular helpful to you, but it does show us where the other properties, the other application properties are to be located if planning permission is granted. And then just a wider shot from further away from the site. So you can see that some of the properties within the street scene have given over their front gardens to hard standing in totality, but some still have front gardens. And I think that may be it. Yes, I'm fairly sure that's it. So let me go back to the block plan and I can respond to the issues raised about parking. Right, just bear with me. I'll swap and get rid of that. Okay, so I'll just zoom in a bit. So yes, as was mentioned, the entire frontage of the plot or the plots from the side, one side boundary to the other will be given over to parking. So the parking spaces are sitting side by side across the entire frontage. They are meeting standard parking spaces. They are relatively small, but they are standard parking spaces. So this will introduce a series of parked cars in front of the property, which is not typical of Stafford Crescent, but it is seen on it can be done on other plots. So that will introduce a different appearance to the plot. And I'll swap my just bear with me. I think that's better. Yes, so, but this Stafford Crescent does have a variety of properties. There is this group here. The properties might offer a suitable residential accommodation, but in terms of their architectural style and appearance, they're not of merit to justify a refusal on the basis that we will lose properties of a particular style. So we certainly wouldn't be recommending that members refuse this because of the loss of the properties, but you need to be satisfied that what is proposed is acceptable. And hopefully I can show you the external appearance of the properties as proposed. There we go. So it's a group of 4 properties set in sort of 2 pairs with front doors located next to each other. So there's a certain rhythm and appearance to these properties. So they're quite traditional in appearance, unlike the properties that they replace. And they're not identical to any other properties in the street scene, but they are proposed to be brick and tile, and there are some detailing to the windows with sills and lintels and canopies above the front door. So the officer view is that the development, whilst it contrasts to the properties either side, it is not in itself harmful to the street scene, and there is no justification on a sustainable grounds to refuse it on design grounds. There are more properties within the plot than existing, but that doesn't constitute overdevelopment. The development fits within the plot and is unacceptable in terms of its form, scale and massing, and the parking provision is acceptable, albeit that it does take up the entire site frontage.
Before I open this to members, Ms. Mills, could I just ask, you speak about brick there, so I assume that those walls are of a red brick type, is that correct?
My understanding, that is what is proposed. We don't have the precise details of the materials. We are recommending a condition to secure approval of the final brick, and yeah, we will be carefully be ensuring that any brick that is proposed is appropriate for the location of a typical type of red brick that is reflected on other properties within the street.
Okay, but again, I'm correct in saying, am I not, that the properties adjacent and indeed in front of on the other side of the road are as I recall, whitish hue. Is that not correct?
Yeah, they're all light coloured painted properties, so it will be a contrast to those. certainly.
I noticed Councillor Holland wished to speak, then Councillor Burgess, I think, wants to speak as well.
Thank you, Chair. I will unmask myself now as the other councillor who signed the call-in for this application, and I did so on the grounds of residents' concerns, which Councillor Sweeney's outlined. I, of course, as a member of the committee, make no predetermination of the matter, but I did accept some of the concerns that were brought to us by residents, and I did take the time to go and have a look at the site. If you go online, as I do, and you look at cat pictures a lot, there is a repeated meme of which the caption is, "If I fits, I sits," and it's about cats sitting in boxes, which they're apt to do, and in other enclosed spaces. And we've just heard from our officer, who's very gamely defended the officer's report that's been put in front of us tonight to the best of her ability. But the argument seems to be, if it fits, then we have to permit. And I don't believe that's the case. I think a sardine tin row of 8 cars facing the frontage of the property would technically fit, but it is not something that I'm willing to permit. And if our officer could show us the block plan, again, I appreciate we're looking at the elevations there. If I was to go for a single reason on which I would propose refusal of the application, it is over intensification. Now, we've nothing to do with the bottom end of this site, or the bottom of the gardens of the properties that are still there. That application isn't in front of us, and what happens to it is none of our business. But what I would say is we're looking now on our screen at an attempt by a developer to place 4 dwellings on space that is currently is only 2/3 the size of something that's currently occupied by 2 dwellings. And that, to my mind, is textbook overdevelopment. It's like the opposite of garden grabbing. The garden has been grabbed and it's completely blank, you can see. So we really are squeezing an awful lot out of this site. And I feel that's detrimental to the residential amenity of the people who live there already, and certainly to the amenity of the people who might conceivably dwell in those properties if we were to permit them. Turning to some of the other comments that Councillor Sweeney made, I'm not a fan of non-standard construction. I don't share Councillor Parker's nostalgia for them, and I used to live in a non-standard miner's cottage up on Parkside, and it was hell on earth. But it is true to say that that is the street scene, that is the character of the area. I don't like it necessarily. I don't like Rococo. I don't like brutalist concrete perhaps either. But it is true to say that these dwellings would be very different from what is there, which at the moment is in character and is similar across the 12 pairs of semis that currently exist. Now, I would normally expect a developer to make this as their first bid. If you're a developer, developer greed, to quote Gordon Gekko, is good because it places an upward pressure on the amount of value that you can squeeze out of a plot of land. But I would have expected our officers at the very least to push back a little bit and to say, well, actually, you are squeezing 4 properties onto 2/3 of the space that's currently occupied by 2 properties. It is not acceptable on those terms. And perhaps the developer would then have come back and said, okay, well, here's a 3 townhouse solution. Here even is a pair of semis on this plot. So you could say, okay, I'm going to grab the gardens and put something else in the bare plot that we can see on the screen in front of us that's blank at the moment. But it seems to me, this is incredibly tight. This is a huge caught into a pint pot. As Councillor Sweeney said. So I'm minded, I will listen to what other councillors got to say, but I'm minded to propose refusal on that grounds.
Councillor Burgess.
Thank you, Chair. Well, looking at the plan as I can see it, you've got 8 spaces for cars there, okay, but where's the facility for a disabled driver? There doesn't seem to be any. If they're all squashed in, there's no room for a disabled driver to open the doors or to get a wheelchair or a scooter into the vehicle. That's one of my concerns. That's following on from what the previous councillor said. I'm not happy with this application at all. I think it's squashed in. And I do agree that it's like putting a pint of beer into a half-pint glass, if I can use that expression. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I go for refusal. on the grounds has been stated. And a good point my fellow councillor said for disabled people to move into these properties. I mean, we have got the same design houses in Crossheath area, and they built as temporary accommodation, like the old prefabs, and a lot of design went into them. I won't say any more about them because they are people's homes, and we're not here to criticise or whatever. But I think how can you get 4 across? And what really puts me right off is 2 bungalows at the back. So you're blocking the back entrance. So the only entrance you've got to the 4 houses at the front, as I saw on them, as I see in front of us, is an alleyway. I know you've got alleyway, you've got on each side. That again reduces the size of the properties, getting the bins out. So really, it's just, and even on new estates that's come before this committee, we don't see this shoehorning of properties as tight as we see on the screen. So, Mr. Chairman, I go for refusal on the over-intensification. We can't include the bungalows, I know, but that's got to be part of my submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that Stafford Crescent on the photographs looks really quite a narrow road. And when you consider you've got, there is provision of parking, albeit very tight. Then you've also got to consider potential visitors to these families. At the moment, there's only, 2 properties there, but then you go and have all those additional people, all their visitors, and it's a very narrow road. So I just think it would cause a lot of problems in the area. So I would be minded to refuse this as well.
Councillor Reddish.
Hi, I've just been looking through the report and I can't see any reference to bin storage. Are they supposed to be putting their bins at the front, at the back? How are they going to get, if you're in the middle, what happens? Can you just enlighten me? Because I can't see it in the report, because that may be another issue.
There is the ability to get from the rear garden to the front from all properties. The hatched area here shows a route from the rear garden. So there is the ability to store your bins, as is a typical thing within the rear garden, and get them out to the front for collection without having to drag them through the properties, if you will, one of the properties in the middle, not on the edge.
Would I be right, Mrs. Moulton, though, looking at the block plan in saying that were all the car parking spaces to be occupied, it will be impossible to take a bin from the rear of the property to the street itself, short of taking it over the top of a motor car?
That's correct. You would need to move a vehicle, one of your vehicles from your frontage, to be able to move your bins onto the pavement. And to confirm what was mentioned earlier, these parking spaces aren't designed, aren't standard to accommodate a vehicle, a disabled person's vehicle, so that they're not wide enough to have space at the side to get out, the additional space that you require if you are a disabled person. There is no reason why parking within the highway would cause a highway safety issue, and on the basis of national planning policy, then there is no sustainable highway safety reason to refuse the application. Obviously, you've got concerns about the visual impact of having parked vehicles across the frontage, but I would argue that there is no highway safety reason that you could sustain to justify refusal. And before we move to a vote, we need to fully understand what is meant by over intensification, what is the harm arising? Is it visual impact? Is it visual impact on highway? Is it residential amenity? Because on that, I would just want to point out that the proposal meets the adopted space about dwelling standards. So in terms of how we assess residential amenity, it accords with the standards that we have in place. So there isn't residential amenity grounds, or certainly no conflict with the guidance to support a residential amenity argument to resist this application.
Just to pursue that a little bit further, I mean, one of the things that confuses me there is, I mean, surely there is a problem with residential amenity if you cannot get your bins out. If most of us don't put our bins out, and indeed most of us would be unpopular with our neighbours were we to put our bins out in the afternoon and leave them lying around on the street. In fact, perhaps the council would have something to say about that. So most of us put these things out fairly late of an evening. One would assume that by that time those parking spaces will be occupied, and that leads us with a problem. And of course, it would also lead us with a problem in the morning when people will be confronted with a phalanx of bins when they want to back their car out onto the road. So it would seem to me there is an issue of residential amenity. Colleagues may disagree with me, I don't know. And in that respect, I think we do confront a very real problem. Not to mention, as our officer has pointed out, perhaps the notion of having all of these cars across there. Again, perhaps it will be of use for us to know how wide these bays are. Modern motor cars are substantially wider than ones even when I was a child, albeit that's a long time ago now. But it just intrigues me as to what sort of vehicle one would get into those spaces.
Well, they don't provide that dimension on the plan, but looking at that, the red line denotes 2.4 metres, and certainly those spaces are slightly wider than that red line. 2.4 metres is a minimum width of a parking space. So I would say it is they're marginally wider than the minimum width of a parking space. So 4.8 metres by 2.4 metres is a minimum width. So there are small parking spaces. On the issue of residential amenity, our space around dwelling standard addresses separation distances between properties to ensure privacy is maintained, garden areas, overbearing, loss of light, that kind of thing. It doesn't address amenity issues, the inconvenience or the problems arising from bin storage, although I accept that does affect your enjoyment of your own home and has an impact on your living conditions if it's inconvenient to bring your bins out to the front for collection.
Councillor Cooper.
Well, I've actually, as you've been talking, I've realised you've sort of acknowledged the point there, but I was just going to say, would it not come under privacy? Because if you've got different neighbours knocking on your door, asking if you can move bins or move cars or things like that, can't we argue that might be an issue that's going to affect in terms of privacy? Possibly, I don't know.
I don't know whether that is. I understand the point that it would be inconvenient. It would be more challenging and more time consuming to bring your bins out to the front because you would have to move a vehicle off the drive to manoeuvre your bins out onto the pavement for collection. And potentially you would have, but I think in most places people often find that someone else's bin is behind on their driveway because, well, that's my experience anyway, that the collection people don't always put them back where they are, so you end up moving the bins yourself out of the way. You wouldn't necessarily be knocking on someone's door and asking them to do that. But again, I acknowledge the concerns about the the issues in this particular case because there is no clear route for a bin to get from the rear of the property to the front without manoeuvring a vehicle out to the space, assuming that all the spaces are occupied.
Councillor Moffat and Councillor Northcott and Councillor Holland.
Thanks, Chair. I think the point that Councillor Burgess made is a really important point about accessibility, and particularly if somebody who, I mean, you know, we ought to be building properties that anybody could purchase or live in, not just people who are able-bodied or do not have a disability. So I am really concerned about that, actually. And I'm also minded by Councillor Holland mentioning that no alternatives had perhaps been put to the developer, like perhaps having 3 houses instead of the 4 that are there, and actually reducing the number of houses proposed might actually give a bit more space and consideration to people who might use different types or need to use different types of vehicles. And I think it's on those grounds that I would really be objecting to permitting this. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we say that the design isn't acceptable in terms of the impact to the character and form of the area, and go on to say that the design doesn't meet modern day living expectations in terms of access to bins, access to charging points. We're assuming that everybody's going to play ball and absolutely parks their car correctly within a few millimetres so the others can enjoy the same privilege. My experience is that people tend to not think about that and aren't quite so accurate in their parking, myself included on that one. That this is a poor design, and it's not really acceptable for the area and form that it's producing. Had the properties been further back, that may have helped things to stagger in terms of being able to have bin access, but having to clearly bring your bin either through the house or all the way around from the back isn't really good design, I don't think, in this modern day world. I think we should be better than that and insist on better standards. And I couldn't support this, really. I think the impact on residential amenity is also included in that. And I think people that actually live there wouldn't enjoy being closed in by all those cars for a kick-off.
Councillor Holland and Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. So I think we formulated one head of refusal, if that's what I can call it, in relation to the poor design, and that's that you can't get your bins out in the morning, or at least there is some element of difficulty in doing so by virtue of the way in which this has all been designed, including those 8 spaces wall to wall at the front for parking. It's not possible practically to present your bins, and I don't think there's a policy that underpins that, but it is a practical example of how this design is unacceptable. And for the benefit of officers who are looking to us to formulate our reasons for refusal, I'd like to suggest National Planning Policy Framework paragraph 124. Paragraph 124 says that planning decisions should support development that makes efficient use of land, taking into account, and I'll pick a couple of these, sub-paragraph A, the identified need for different types of housing and other forms of development and the availability of land suitable for accommodating it. Well, I'm not sure that there is an identified need for these 4 townhouses on a plot, on an estate currently occupied by pairs of semis. Sub-paragraph D, the desirability of maintaining an area's prevailing character and setting, including residential gardens. Now, as we've seen, the prevailing character of the setting is pairs of semis with plots that include gardens that are clearly twice as large as the gardens that are attached to these properties. Now, that's not to say that I'm disdaining the design of those properties in itself. I'm sure they do meet the legal requirements, albeit that the diagram we're looking at doesn't have dimensions attached to it. I'm sure that the legal bare minimums have been met, and that we've probably already tonight approved dwellings in the other application we've heard that are probably of a similar size if you look at the internal dimensions of those and the number of people who you expect will dwell in them. But in this area, I don't believe we should be permitting it. In this area, it is overdevelopment. And paragraph 124, subparagraph E, we should be taking into account the importance of securing well-designed, attractive and healthy places. Again, I don't believe it's well-designed, as evidenced by the parking problem that we've had. And to stretch Councillor Sweeney's metaphor to its absolute limit, this is not a quart in a pint pot. What we've done is we've taken the pint pot, we've sawed the top third off it, because you can see that there's a part of this that faces Wiltshire Grove, regardless of whether it has bungalows on it or nothing at all. It is not included in the application that's in front of us. And therefore we've taken our pint pot, sawed the top third off, and now we're attempting to pour 2 pints into it. I'm not a mathematician, I've not done the maths, but it is a more than doubling, because of that garden being snatched away. It is a more than doubling of the housing density on these sites compared to what's there now. It is clearly unacceptable, therefore, in my view. And I hope I formulated that as a refusal that's acceptable to officers and that will attract a seconder from among other councillors.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, when these houses were built, they were built as a community where people live and play, go to work, come home and relax. What we do, we're taking that away, in my view, we're taking that away from, we're pushing people in tighter where years ago we demolished properties because of the space that people hadn't got. The community's there, healthy, people living together, always conflicts, but in the majority of people living together. And here we are as a planning committee, and I understand the officers' remarks, and they're stuck within their guidelines. But Councillor Holland has just made a point that could get around that. But it's again this community that we're trying to destroy. That's not our job. Our job is to get a community, work with the people in the area, and get a better community in these trying times. Thank you. Councillor Holland.
Thank you very much, Councillor. You anticipated my question then as to whether you were prepared to do so. Any further comment from members? Councillor Holland.
Sorry, I don't wish to stretch it out. Is anybody wanting to formulate that concern about disability access and the size of the parking spaces? And could our officers advise us what we might say that is policy compliant and legal in terms of an objection to this application? If not, could they advise us that we should not be talking about the disability access?
Yes, through you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not clear. There are some concerns being expressed this evening regarding the proposal around the intensity of development. And I'll take on board particularly Councillor Holland's comments regarding paragraph 124 of the MPPF. That does look at densities and talks about supporting development subject to certain criteria. I think there are, if there are concerns around design, which I think the concerns expressed this evening are a design-related concern about the level of development. Yes, can you hear me now? There are, I think, some policies that could express those concerns and set out within the report and the appendix to the report on page 25. Policy CSP1 on design quality, I think, does echo some of the concerns that have been raised by members this evening. and that would relate to having public and private spaces that are safe, attractive, easily distinguished, accessible, and complementing the built form. So that is a potential area. But also in terms of the MPPF, in terms of the design aspects that members were concerned about, paragraph 130 of the MPPF does talk about planning decisions ensuring that development functions well and adds to the overall quality of an area. And I think there are areas there. It also talks about being visually attractive as a result of good architecture, layout, and appropriate and effective landscaping. Obviously, members touched upon those areas also earlier. So I think I hear the submissions and the comments that have been made by members and the general concerns that have been raised. And I just raise those two areas. Colleagues might be able to comment further, but it would appear from the concerns that have been raised that that existing policy within the core spatial strategy, which is policy CSP1 on design quality, and paragraph 130 potentially of the National Planning Policy Framework, might have a particular resonance with the concerns that have been expressed this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Just to return to Councillor Holland's query about disabled parking bays, because I don't think that was raised in that response. I think Councillor was wondering whether that should be, again, may be encapsulated in paragraph 130 and design issues. And maybe that's where we would rest those concerns if those are concerns that colleagues have. But is there anything more specific we should be saying about that, perhaps?
Yes, I think at this moment in time, it's the views expressed were around could be encapsulated within how the design of a scheme and its functioning actually contribute to the quality of the area. So I think that general concern could be picked up as part of the policy references within the functioning of the development.
Councillor Williams.
Just a point on disability. I mean, a few years ago, we talked about houses where people could go in and adapt those properties instead of moving into other properties that become disabled through age and whatever, and they'd have to move. And we were talking about wider doors, making areas for downstairs toilets. And that's so people could stay in their own home. These are, you're creating a different kind of property. And then, as I said before, in an environment, this is a residential environment, you're putting these buildings in, and they won't be suitable, let's say, for disabled people. So I think it's a point that we should be making more of and other planning applications. But I think in this particular one, it's a good point to make, really. I'm not making that out of any political whatever point, but we should be looking to the future. We should be looking for disabled access, ACE development. Thank you.
Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, I mean, it's a paragraph which is always there in every single planning application, is reducing inequalities. And the phrasing is the duty aim is to make sure public authorities think about things like discrimination. And I think Councillor Burgess bringing up how squashed those minimal car parking spaces are. I just think it is a really important point that we should be thinking about as well.
I think it's probably time to bring this to a close. I think we've been round the houses. So at the moment, we've got Councillor Holland's proposal for refusal, He's adduced various paragraphs, which I'm sure our officers have recorded from the NPPF. It's been suggested, I don't know if the council wishes to include paragraph 130. I see a nod. That's there, and also, and I confess I didn't get my pencil out in time. It was suggested that a policy from the core spatial strategy was also relevant at this juncture. So I think again the councillor is indicating that he would like that included in his motion. So, as I say, we've had a long debate on this. I think we all know where we stand now vis-a-vis these things. So we have had a motion put forward that this application be refused for the reasons stated in those relevant paragraphs and that policy. Could I ask, please, those in favour of refusal on those grounds? And I think that is unanimous, so that application is refused. That brings us to item 6 of our agenda, update on the breach of planning obligation. This is at Silverdale, of course. You see the report in front of you. I don't think our officers will have anything to add to this report. I'll just check to make sure I'm correct in saying that.
No, there's not an update I can provide tonight. Thank you.
So our member, I offer this for comment, but our members content that this be received as printed. I see no comment, but I see nodding heads, so that item is received as is recommended. We can progress to item 7. Again, something which generated quite a bit of debate in this committee in the past. Here you can see an appeal. The appeal decision is that the appeal be allowed, but the cost decision has been refused. Again, I don't know if our officers wish to comment on this in any specific way.
I think the cost decision is probably the most noteworthy of the two decisions. Obviously, the appeal decision, the inspector wasn't persuaded that this was an unacceptable form of development, but in reaching a conclusion on the cost decision, the inspector found no fault in the call-in procedure. Considered that there was no reasons to say that was the conduct around the calling in of the application was unreasonable, and therefore should result in the cost decision being awarded against the council. And also the inspector wasn't persuaded that the reason for refusal was manifestly unsound, and that in itself would have been unreasonable behaviour. So whilst the inspector didn't agree with the conclusion that the council reached on the application, they didn't think it was so unreasonable that an award of cost was justified. So I think, yeah, that's more noteworthy than the decision itself.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you. Members will recall that this is another example of me calling in an officer report and then proposing refusal against recommendations. It hasn't come through for us, but I would agree with what our officers just said, which is that the cost decision is the important one here, particularly because certain individuals had cast aspersions against this authority as a planning authority and against certain members individually who are here tonight about their decision-making process and about the motivations behind it. I think we made a decision that's been not upheld, but at least agreed it was a reasonable decision to make, and that should give us confidence in our process, including the call-in process for future. I'm only sorry that the planning inspector on this occasion was wrong.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any further comments? Are we content to receive this report? Well, we've no choice, of course. So let us progress to our final agenda item this evening, item 8, which is to consider any business which is regarded as urgent within the relevant section of the relevant Act. I know of none before this meeting. I look to our officers to see if they know of any. and they don't, which means we can draw this meeting to a close. Do try not to be blown away with the wind as you go home. Thank you very much for your attendance and what I think has been a good and full debate.